The bride's father canceled the wedding before I had even learned where the ceremony would be held. Until that moment, I had done everything Claire Donovan paid me to do. I wore the charcoal suit she selected, remembered the details of our imaginary 11-month relationship, and kept my hand lightly against her waist while guests arrived at the rehearsal dinner. Claire wore a small sapphire ring we had purchased from an antique jeweler 4 days earlier. We had known each other for 7 days. Our engagement was supposed to survive one wedding weekend, stop her relatives from treating her unmarried life as a family emergency, and help her secure the final board vote for a housing project she had spent 3 years building. Then Patrick Donovan, father of the bride and owner of the estate where the ceremony would take place, walked into the ballroom, saw me, and dropped the folder in his hand. Programs scattered across the marble floor. The bride, Claire's younger sister Megan, hurried toward him. "Dad, are you all right?" Patrick did not look at her. His eyes remained fixed on the narrow scar beneath my left ear and the silver cufflink at my wrist. The cufflink had belonged to my father. It was engraved with a stag standing beneath 3 oak branches. Patrick crossed the room so quickly that several guests stepped aside. "What is your name?" he demanded. "James Walker." "Your real name." Claire moved between us. "That is his real name." Patrick seized my wrist and turned the cufflink toward the light. His face lost every trace of color. "Where did you get this?" "My father left it to me." "What was his name?" "David Walker." Patrick looked toward his bride, then at his wife, whose hand had risen to her mouth. "Canceled the ceremony," he said. Megan stared at him. "What?" "The wedding is canceled." The groom's family began whispering. Claire tightened her grip on my hand. "Dad, what does James have to do with Megan's wedding?" Patrick's voice broke when he answered. "Because David Walker was not his father's birth name. And if this man is who I think he is, the estate you plan to give Megan tomorrow never belonged to us." Before I tell you how one false engagement uncovered a vanished child, a stolen family estate, and a love neither of us trusted while an entire wedding waited for the truth, subscribe if you enjoy emotional stories about hidden identities, family loyalty, and second chances. And leave a comment telling me whether you would stay after a father canceled his daughter's ceremony because he recognized your face. Because the reason Patrick Donovan stopped the wedding changed every person in that room. 7 days earlier, I had been restoring the carved balcony inside a 19th century Richmond theater when Claire Donovan stepped through the construction barrier and asked whether I was willing to become emotionally convincing for one weekend without expecting emotional compensation afterward. I lowered the sanding block in my hand. She wore a navy coat over a cream blouse, her dark auburn hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck, and an expression suggesting she had rehearsed the sentence until it sounded almost practical. "Emotionally convincing," I repeated. "That sounds more expensive than professionally convincing." She placed a leather folder and 2 cups of coffee on my workbench. I recognized the emblem of the private companion agency where I had registered 8 months earlier. My architectural restoration company had lost its largest client after a hotel developer entered bankruptcy midway through a project. The unpaid invoices left me responsible for materials, payroll, and equipment loans. Agency assignments helped me keep 2 craftsmen employed while I rebuilt the business. Most involved charity dinners, formal events, or accompanying clients who did not want to arrive alone. I had never played a fiancé at a wedding. "You are James Walker?" she asked. "That depends on whether this concerns the balcony or the folder." "The folder." "Then yes. The agency says you are discreet, observant, and capable of remembering personal details under pressure." They omitted charming. Charm was not among my requirements. That seems short-sighted when hiring a fiancé. The corner of her mouth lifted before she opened the folder. Claire's younger sister, Megan, was getting married at Donovan Hall, the family's historic estate outside Charlottesville. The weekend would include a rehearsal dinner, ceremony, reception, and a Sunday meeting of the Donovan Charitable Trust. Claire directed a nonprofit called Second Door, which provided housing and employment support for young adults leaving foster care. She had spent 3 years developing a plan to convert an abandoned Donovan-owned convent school into apartments, classrooms, counseling offices, and job training workshops. Her father chaired the trust controlling the property. "Why does your relationship status affect the vote?" I asked. "It should not, but it does. My father believes the director of a permanent residential program should demonstrate what he calls personal permanence, meaning marriage, meaning he thinks living alone proves I avoid responsibility. You run a nonprofit. He calls that professional passion. He wants evidence that I can sustain long-term private commitments. Does he ask married men whether they can sustain their jobs? No. Convenient. The misunderstanding began when Claire's aunt asked whether there was someone important in her life. Claire answered that there was, meaning the residents and staff involved in Second Door. Her aunt heard serious relationship, her mother heard engagement. By the time Claire tried to correct them, Patrick had told two undecided trustees that his oldest daughter was finally building what he called a stable personal foundation. You could tell him the truth, I said. I tried. He said the engagement proved I was ready to discuss permanent stewardship and agreed to place the convent project on Sunday's agenda. So you preserved the misunderstanding, long enough to force the board to examine the proposal. And after the vote, we announced that the engagement ended privately. That may confirm every unfair assumption he already holds. By then, the property transfer will be protected through an independent trust. She turned to the payment page. The amount would cover nearly 4 months of payroll and replace a specialized milling machine damaged during the theater job. You are paying too much, I said. I am paying for preparation, background scrutiny, public photographs, prolonged exposure to my relatives, and the possibility that someone asks you to give a wedding toast. That final risk should double the fee. Agreed. The arrangement required us to present a believable 11-month relationship, attend the rehearsal dinner and wedding, remain publicly engaged until after Sunday's trust meeting, and remember a shared history strong enough to survive a detailed questioning. We would have separate bedrooms in the estate guest wing. No shared finances, no physical affection without mutual agreement. Kissing only if refusing would expose the arrangement. Neither participant would interpret protectiveness, jealousy, personal disclosure, or emotional reliance during the assignment as proof of genuine romantic intention. You highlighted the final clause, Sabo, I said. Clarity prevents confusion. In contracts, why choose a stranger rather than a friend? Her fingers stopped on the page. A friend might believe helping gave him a claim on my future. That happened before. She looked at the unfinished balcony rather than at me. A former colleague helped me through a grant crisis. He later told people I owed him a relationship because he had made sacrifices. Did you report him? He left before the investigation finished. And now you prefer someone with a defined fee and an exit date. Yes. Her honesty was not flattering, but it was fair. Why does the convent project matter beyond your job? I asked. She removed several photographs from the folder. The building stood on a hill near a small town, its stone walls weathered but intact. Dormitories surrounded a courtyard. An old chapel had been converted into storage. Her plan would create 30 apartments, counseling services, childcare, classrooms, and a reserve fund allowing former residents to return after moving out. I spent almost 3 years in foster care, she said. I looked at her more carefully. You are Patrick Donovan's biological daughter. Yes, my mother became seriously ill after Megan was born. My father was involved in a lawsuit that froze several family accounts. Relatives fought over temporary guardianship because controlling me meant influencing the estate trust. The court placed me with strangers until the dispute ended. Your family owned an estate large enough to host a wedding. Money does not prevent abandonment. It gives adults better language for explaining it. And when you came home, everyone acted as though the placement had been an administrative inconvenience. Nobody asked what it felt like to carry my belongings in a trash bag. My father had spent part of his childhood in group homes before Samuel and Ruth Walker adopted him at 14. Every winter, he donated anonymously to housing programs. A temporary bed helps someone survive, he once told me. A door they can return to tells them one mistake is not exile. Claire's project mattered. Why did you choose me specifically? I asked. Your profile says you restore old buildings without erasing every mark of use. The convent needs someone who understands preservation. Professional reason. Former clients said you make people feel safe without treating them as fragile. Still professional. Her eyes moved to mine. Your photograph looked kind. The answer came quietly enough to surprise both of us. That seems like dangerous criteria for hiring a liar. Can you do it? I should have refused. Claire was controlled, intelligent, and clearly accustomed to turning vulnerability into procedure. Pretending to love her meant standing close enough to notice everything the procedure concealed. Yet the project mattered, and so did the payment. One weekend, I said. Relief softened her face. One temporary engagement. We met the following morning at an antique jewelry shop. Claire rejected every large diamond because her mother knew she disliked anything designed mainly to advertise its cost. She selected a small sapphire surrounded by seed pearls in a worn platinum setting. "Someone wore this every day," she said. "Most antique rings belong to someone. I mean the underside. It was part of an ordinary life." "You like evidence of use. Perfection makes me suspicious." The jeweler placed the ring in my palm, and I slid it onto Claire's finger to test the size. Her hand trembled. "Too tight?" I asked. "No." "Then why are you staring at it? It looks real." "That is the purpose. Objects should not create belief this quickly. They do not. They give people permission to accept the story they already prefer." Her gaze lifted. "What story does my family prefer?" "That someone choosing you in a familiar form proves you can create permanence." "And what do you think?" "I think they should have noticed you already spent 3 years building something meant to outlast you." Color touched her cheeks. She removed the ring and handed it to the jeweler for cleaning, but her fingers brushed mine before she let go. We spent the afternoon creating our fictional history in a quiet cafe. We had supposedly met 11 months earlier while I inspected storm damage at one of Second Door's community centers. Our first date took place beside the James River. I proposed 6 weeks earlier inside the abandoned convent library after helping her measure rooms for the residential program. "What did you say?" she asked. "During the imaginary proposal?" "My mother will ask for exact words. Megan will want every detail. My father will watch my reaction." "What would convince you?" "It does not need to convince me. Your face will be part of the performance." She arranged 3 sugar packets into a straight line. "I would want him to respect my work." "That sounds like an employment reference." "Then say he admires my independence." "People admire independence until it prevents them from feeling necessary." Her fingers stopped moving. "You are making assumptions. You hired me to create a believable relationship. Then invent something believable." I studied her across the table. "I would tell you that you learned to stand alone because adults who promised permanence changed the terms whenever protecting you became inconvenient. I would say I do not want to rescue you, direct you, or become proof that your choices are respectable. I want the ordinary evenings after difficult days when your shoes are beside the door and you no longer need to explain why the work mattered. Then I would ask whether you would let me earn a place in that life." Claire stared at me. "That is too intimate. Is it inaccurate?" "You have known me for one day. You straighten objects when anxious, become more formal when hurt, and have called the convent hours 3 times even though I have never seen it. Most people think I am difficult to read. Most people may be waiting for a version that causes them less inconvenience." She scattered the sugar packets. "Use a shorter proposal." Before we left, the jeweler offered to take an engagement photograph for the insurance file. Claire began to refuse, then placed her ring hand against my chest and moved beside me. My arms settled around her waist. She looked up just before the camera flashed. For 1 second, the warmth in her expression did not appear rehearsed. During the next several days, Claire taught me the Donovan family history, the wedding schedule, and every detail of her proposal. Megan was 30, a pediatric nurse, and marrying Eric Caldwell, an architect who specialized in public schools. Claire loved her sister but resented the way their parents treated Megan's wedding as proof that one daughter had built a proper life while the other had not. Patrick Donovan owned a regional construction company and controlled most of the family trust. Claire's mother, Rebecca, mediated every disagreement until mediation became another form of silence. Patrick's younger brother, Thomas, had died before Claire was born. "How?" I asked. "Officially a boating accident." "Body recovered?" "No." "Children?" "Dad says none." I touched the silver cufflink inside the box my father had left me. The stag beneath 3 oak branches resembled the emblem carved into several photographs of Donovan Hall. "What is that?" Claire asked. "My father's cufflink. The matching one disappeared before he died." The Donovan family crest uses a stag under 3 oaks. Thousands of families use stags, not with the branches crossing exactly that way. "My father never mentioned your family." "Was David Walker his birth name?" "According to his records." "That sounded uncertain." "His birth certificate was filed when he was 15. Samuel Walker said David arrived at a youth home after a flood and remembered only his first name." "And no relatives found him?" "None," he admitted. She looked at the cufflink again. "Bring it this weekend." "Why?" "Because if Dad recognizes it, we should know before Sunday." And if he does not, then it remains a coincidence. On Friday afternoon, Claire drove us toward Donovan Hall. The estate stood in the foothills beyond Charlottesville, surrounded by oak woods, vineyards, and several old school buildings. During the drive, she placed her hand over mine on the center console. No relative watched us. The gesture was unnecessary. "You can still leave," she said. "You would lose the trustees. That is my risk. The fee matters to my employees. I will pay for preparation. I am staying." "Why?" I turned my hand beneath hers. "Because I agreed. Because your project matters, and because I want to know why my father carried your family crest without explaining it." Her fingers tightened. "Whatever happens, you decide when we leave. Your father may disagree. Then he learns." She did not release my hand until the estate gates appeared. Donovan Hall stood at the end of a long drive beneath enormous oak trees. The mansion was built of pale stone with dark shutters and a wide terrace facing the mountains. White wedding tents covered the south lawn. The abandoned convent stood beyond a vineyard, its bell tower visible above the trees. Claire stopped the car but did not move. "When I was in foster care, I used to draw the front staircase from memory," she said. "Why?" "It had 17 steps. Counting them proved the house still existed somewhere. And now you are trying to create a place other people can remember the same way. Buildings cannot promise anyone will return. No, but they can give promises and address." She looked at me. "That was not in the script. No one is watching. Remember the contract." Page 8. Rebecca Donovan met us in the entrance hall. She embraced Claire, admired the sapphire, and welcomed me warmly until I introduced myself. "James Walker?" she repeated. "Yes, David Walker's son. You knew him?" Her face changed, but Patrick appeared behind her before she answered. He was 63, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and controlled enough to make a greeting feel like a legal deposition. He questioned my business, debt, family history, and long-term plans before anyone had removed a coat. "Marriage combines financial risk," he said. Claire stepped between us. "We have discussed finances. A discussion is not a plan. Neither is interrogation." Megan arrived from the upstairs hall and broke the tension by throwing her arms around Claire. She was warmer and more open than I expected. Eric followed, calm and observant. He shook my hand, noticed the old cufflink, and asked whether I restored metalwork. "Mostly buildings and furniture. My father-in-law believes every man should understand land, money, and load-bearing walls. 2 of those can be learned. The third depends on the wall." Megan laughed. Patrick did not. During dinner that evening, Claire and I performed smoothly. I remembered she preferred still water and replaced the sparkling glass before she asked. Rebecca noticed. Megan requested the proposal story. Claire looked at me, granting permission to speak. "I told her I knew she could survive alone," I said. "I was asking whether survival still had to be the highest standard. I said I did not want to rescue her, manage her, or become evidence that her decisions were respectable. I wanted the ordinary evenings after difficult days when her shoes were beside the door and she no longer needed to explain why the work mattered." The table became quiet. Claire's fingers found mine beneath the linen. "That is what he said," she whispered. The performance felt dangerous because part of the speech had become true. After dinner, Claire presented the convent project in the library to Patrick, Rebecca, 2 trustees, Megan, Eric, and Patrick's attorney. She explained renovation costs, transportation, counseling partnerships, apprenticeships, childcare, and resident governance. Patrick argued that the property would produce more income as a wedding venue and luxury retreat. 1 trustee supported him. The other remained undecided. "Your childhood experience gives you compassion," Patrick said. "But compassion does not guarantee stable leadership." "Neither does marriage," Claire replied. "No, but personal permanence matters when creating homes for others." I spoke before deciding whether a hired fiancé had the right. The luxury proposal assumes occupancy rates above comparable properties and excludes the cost of stabilizing the chapel foundation. Claire's plan includes preservation grants covering most structural work. Patrick's eyes narrowed. "My daughter does not require an advocate." "No, she requires the same numbers to matter whether or not a man is sitting beside her." Rebecca lowered her eyes. Megan looked at her father with open disappointment. The trustees postponed the vote until Sunday. Patrick insisted the wedding weekend remain separate from business. For the next hour, it almost did. The rehearsal moved on to the terrace. Bridesmaids laughed. Eric's father practiced a toast. Claire adjusted Megan's veil when the wind caught it. I watched the sisters together and understood that Claire's resentment had never been directed at Megan. She resented the way the family used one daughter's choices to judge the other. "You are staring," Claire said quietly. "I am observing." "That is agency language for staring. You look happy for her." "I am? And sad." "Both can be true." She turned toward me. "What do you think marriage means? Before or after joining a service where strangers rent me for weddings?" "Seriously." I looked toward the ceremony chairs arranged beneath the oak trees. "I think marriage is ordinary responsibility with witnesses. The promises matter, but the proof is who stays after the audience leaves." Her expression softened. "That is dangerously convincing. No one is watching. I am." Before I could answer, Patrick entered the ballroom behind us carrying the final ceremony folder. He saw my face beneath brighter light, then the cufflink at my wrist. The folder fell. When he canceled the wedding, chaos moved through Donovan Hall. Megan demanded an explanation. Eric's parents assumed Patrick had discovered something about their son. Guests crowded the doors. Rebecca ordered the staff to clear the ballroom and send everyone to the terrace. Patrick refused to continue until he understood who I was. Claire removed the sapphire and placed it on the piano. "The engagement is fake," she said before he could expose it himself. Megan stared at her. "What?" "I hired James to pretend to be my fiancé because Dad made my relationship status relevant to the trust vote." Patrick laughed without humor and conveniently selected the son of David Walker. "I did not know you recognized his name." "You brought him wearing Thomas's cufflink." "Who was Thomas?" I asked. Patrick looked toward Rebecca. She sat down slowly. Megan moved beside her mother. Patrick closed the ballroom doors. Claire opened them again. "No closed rooms, Masalam," she said. "Not for this conversation." Patrick turned on her. "This is family business. James's father appears to be part of the family you erased. The doors stay open." The sentence changed the room. Patrick explained that Thomas Donovan was his older brother, not younger as the family biographies claimed. Thomas had been an engineer and social worker who helped their grandmother operate the convent school. He believed residents should receive paid apprenticeships, personal savings accounts, and the right to return after adulthood. Patrick's father, Edward Donovan, controlled the trust and considered those ideas financially irresponsible. Thomas discovered Dad was using school funds to support private construction projects, Patrick said. He accused the family publicly. "Was he right?" Claire asked. Patrick did not answer. Rebecca did. "Yes." Patrick looked at his wife. "You were not there. I saw the ledgers years later." She faced me. "Thomas married a woman named Anna Walker. Samuel Walker was her brother." The surname entered the room like a door opening. "My grandfather?" I asked. "Your father may have been Thomas's son," Rebecca said. "His birth name was David Donovan." I stared at her. "My father was David Walker." "Samuel raised him after Anna died." Patrick crossed toward the windows. "This is speculation." Rebecca's voice sharpened. "You recognized him." Patrick turned back. "I recognized Thomas's scar in the cufflink." "What happened to Thomas?" Megan asked. "A storm damaged the convent roof," Patrick said. "Thomas was driving evidence to an attorney. His car went into the river." "Accident?" Claire asked. "That was the official report." "And David?" "Anna survived long enough to get the child to Samuel. Then she died from her injuries." "Why was the boy declared dead?" I asked. Patrick's expression tightened. "Father produced a clinic certificate after the flood." "Did you believe it?" "I was 19. Claire stepped toward him. "You were 19 for 1 year. What did you do afterward?" Patrick looked away. Rebecca answered again. "David returned when he was 27. My chest tightened. "My father came here?" "He had Thomas's cufflinks and a letter from Samuel. He asked for access to the convent archive and proof of his identity." "What did you do?" Patrick said, "I offered him a settlement." "You threatened Samuel," Rebecca corrected. "Dad's attorney said Samuel could be prosecuted for kidnapping if David continued the claim." "My father accepted?" "He signed away every interest and left." "Why?" Claire's voice broke with anger. "Because Samuel was his father in every ordinary way that mattered," Rebecca said. "David would not risk sending him to prison." Patrick struck his hand against the table. "The settlement was legal." "So is silence," Claire replied. "That does not make it right." Megan looked toward the wedding programs on the floor. "Why cancel my ceremony?" Patrick pointed toward the west lawn beyond the ballroom. Because grandmother's trust gives the wedding meadow, the chapel, and the western cottages to Thomas's descendants if the family ever attempts to transfer them through marriage without disclosing the reversion clause. Eric's face changed. You plan to give us the West property tomorrow. Megan stared at her father. You knew it might belong to someone else. I believed David had no descendants. His gaze moved to me. Until tonight. Patrick had planned to present the deed during the ceremony as a wedding gift. The transfer itself would trigger a claim if I was Thomas's grandson. A public ceremony followed by a legal dispute could expose the family before Patrick controlled the evidence. Canceling the wedding protected the estate, not the bride. Megan understood before anyone said it. You did not cancel because you feared my marriage was wrong, she said. You canceled because you feared your gift was stolen. Patrick did not answer. Eric stepped beside her. We can marry somewhere else. Not tonight, Megan whispered. I need to know whether my father was willing to build our marriage on another family's erasure. Claire moved toward her sister, but Megan raised one hand. I love you, I just need a minute without anyone making decisions for me. She left through the open doors. Eric followed after asking permission. The wedding guests were told the ceremony had been postponed due to a family legal matter. Rumors spread before midnight. Patrick blamed my arrival. Claire blamed his silence. I wanted to leave. The title promise had happened. The fake engagement was exposed. The wedding was canceled. My father's identity had become leverage in a family fight I had not chosen. Claire met me in the guest corridor while I packed. You decide when we leave, Diba, she said. I am deciding now. Then I will drive you. Your sister's wedding is collapsing. Because my father planned to transfer property he may not own. You should stay with Megan. She asked for space. And the trust vote? It no longer matters. She removed the sapphire from her pocket and placed it on the dresser. The convent may belong partly to you. I do not want it. Want is not the first question. Everyone keeps saying that. Because truth comes before preference when other people built their lives on the lie. I closed my bag. Why are you defending this when it may cost your project? Because a home for vulnerable people cannot begin with another vulnerable person being erased. Her voice softened. James, I brought you here for selfish reasons. I will not make staying another one. What do you want me to do? Read what your father left. David had given me a sealed envelope before he died. I kept it inside my tool case because the front carried one instruction. Open when someone recognizes Thomas Donovan's crest. I had thought the sentence referred to a client or collector. Claire sat on the floor beside the bed while I broke the seal. James, if the Donovans recognize the cufflink, then Patrick has finally seen what he spent years refusing to face. My birth name was David Thomas Donovan. Samuel and Ruth Walker raised me after my mother died. They gave me a home and the name I chose to keep. Thomas Donovan was my biological father. He tried to protect children at the convent school from being used as unpaid labor while trust money funded private construction. Patrick knew enough to stop the theft when he became an adult. Instead, he helped preserve the settlement because exposing the truth threatened his inheritance. I returned once. Patrick offered money and threatened Samuel. I signed because blood did not give the Donovans the right to punish the man who stayed. The first silence protected us. The later years protected me from the fear that you would look at our home and see only a hiding place. I stopped reading. Claire did not touch me until I held out my hand. Then she placed her fingers inside it. No relatives watched. No contract required the gesture. The letter continued. Thomas hid his evidence beneath the old chapel bell. The second cufflink contains the key. I kept one. Patrick kept the other after our meeting. If the family attempts to transfer the western estate through a wedding or sale, the reversion clause returns the convent and west property to Thomas's descendants under a charitable condition. Do not use it for revenge. Use it to make a place where leaving does not mean losing the right to return. Patrick has the other cufflink, Claire said. Probably. Then he knew how to open the archive. Or knew enough to prevent anyone else. Do you want to search? I looked at her. Your sister's ceremony depends on what we find. Megan's marriage does not depend on a meadow. Your project does. No project gives me the right to ask you to remain silent. The choice cost her something real. That was the moment the false relationship moved beyond any clause we had signed. She did not choose me over her sister or family. She chose truth over the advantage my ignorance could give her. Yes, I said. I want to search. Claire called her attorney, the trust's independent counsel, and a county preservation officer. Patrick refused access to the chapel after midnight. Rebecca produced a copy of David's old settlement and said the archive clause made obstruction legally dangerous. Megan returned with Eric and announced that the ceremony would remain postponed until ownership was clear. "You do not have to do this for me, I told her. "I am not doing it for you," she said. "I am doing it because I refuse to begin my marriage by accepting property my father hid from someone else." Her answer sounded like Claire's, but it belonged entirely to her. We crossed the west lawn under portable lights. The chapel stood at the edge of the convent grounds, a small stone building with stained glass windows and an iron bell tower. Patrick followed with his attorney. Rebecca carried an old velvet box. Inside was the matching cufflink. "I took it from Patrick's desk after David came here," she said. Patrick stared at her. "You stole from me. I preserved what you intended to destroy." The two cufflinks fit together, forming a small silver key shaped like a stag's antlers. Beneath the chapel bell, 3 oak branches were carved into a metal plate. The key opened it. A narrow compartment released behind the stone wall. Inside was a fireproof case containing letters, deeds, ledgers, photographs, and audio tapes. The preservation officer documented everything before the attorney touched it. The first envelope carried David's childhood name. "My son, if Samuel gives you this, your mother and I failed to return safely. Samuel Walker is the man I trust with your life. If he raises you, he becomes your father through every breakfast, fever, argument, and ordinary evening he stays. Do not let Donovan blood make that love temporary. This estate was built from land, but the convent was meant to create homes for children who had none. My father has turned gratitude into labor and charity into ownership. Keep whichever name allows you to live honestly. If you ever return, use what remains not for revenge, but to make sure no young person is told shelter must be earned by silence." Thomas's signature appeared beneath the words. Claire's thumb moved across my knuckles. The financial ledgers showed Edward Donovan had diverted convent funds into private development projects. Residents were sent to family construction sites under unpaid vocational programs. Maintenance money disappeared while dormitories became unsafe. Thomas had gathered testimony from former residents and staff. A tape preserved his final confrontation with Edward. "These young people do not owe us labor because we gave them rooms," Thomas said. Edward answered, "They owe this family everything. A home that demands gratitude as rent is only another institution." Another voice entered. Patrick's voice, young but unmistakable. He warned Thomas that exposing the records would destroy the company and the estate. Thomas answered, "Then the estate should survive smaller rather than remain whole through theft." Patrick said, "Give Dad time to correct it privately." Thomas replied, "Children are living there now." The tape ended with Edward ordering a security supervisor to recover the documents before Thomas reached the state attorney. Another recording captured the night of the storm. A security officer reported striking Thomas's vehicle while trying to stop him. Patrick told him to call an ambulance. Edward ordered the man to retrieve the files first. "You knew the crash was not an accident," Claire said. Patrick stared at the floor. "I knew afterward. And you remained silent. Father controlled the police report, the company, and every account. Then he died 20 years ago." Patrick's face tightened. By then, reopening the case would have destroyed everything we had rebuilt. Rebecca looked at him. "You always say rebuilt. You mean preserved. The final deed established the reversion clause. If the Donovan trustees attempted to sell or gift the Western estate for private benefit while concealing harm to convent residents, ownership would pass to Thomas Donovan or his descendants, provided they placed the land into charitable use. The wedding gift would have triggered the transfer. DNA confirmation would make me the legal beneficiary." Patrick understood what the documents meant. "The ceremony can proceed elsewhere, so," he said quickly. "The property transfer will be withdrawn." Megan looked at him. "That solves your legal problem, not the lie." Patrick turned to me. "Your company is in debt. I know about the hotel bankruptcy. Renounce the reversion claim, sign a confidentiality agreement, and I will pay every outstanding invoice. Claire receives the convent for second door. Megan receives a different property. The trust remains stable." The offer targeted everything practical. My employees would remain paid. Claire's project could open. Megan could have the gift her father promised. The family company might survive without public scandal. All I had to do was surrender my father's history and trust the man who had threatened him into silence. Claire released my hand and stepped between us. "Do not make this decision for my project." "It matters to you," I said. "That does not give it the right to purchase your silence. The convent could house 30 people next year. Then I will find another building. You spent 3 years building this plan. I will spend 3 more before asking vulnerable people to live inside a program created through the same bargain used against David. Stay quiet, and we will give you part of what was already meant for you. Patrick's composure fractured. You hired this man 1 week ago. Claire removed the sapphire and placed it on top of the archive case. Yes. I hired him because you taught me that a woman's private life could be used as evidence against her. That was dishonest. But I will not protect that lie by helping you repeat a larger one. You are choosing a paid stranger over your family. Claire faced him. I am choosing not to become you, Madito. Patrick reached for the deed. The trust attorney blocked him, but the movement struck the metal compartment. A heavy bell support pin shifted above us. I heard the grind before anyone else. I pushed Claire aside as part of the iron frame dropped. It struck my shoulder and drove me against the wall. The old floor cracked beneath my weight. I fell through to my waist above a narrow maintenance shaft. Claire seized my jacket while Eric and the preservation officer caught my arms. For one terrible second, I hung above darkness, hearing the bell vibrate over my head and remembering my father waking from nightmares about river water, broken glass, and Samuel carrying him through rain. They pulled me onto solid stone. Claire held my face between her hands. Look at me. My breathing would not settle. James? She asked carefully. Which James? The question escaped before I could stop it. She understood. The one who decides. I closed my eyes, then opened them. James Walker. Then stay with me, James Walker. The archive was secured before dawn. State investigators arrived Saturday morning. The wedding remained canceled, but Megan and Eric gathered their closest relatives in the garden. They did not marry. They spoke privately with their pastor and decided to reschedule after the legal crisis ended. I want the day to begin with consent rather than damage control, Megan told me. That includes my own. The larger guest list dispersed amid rumors. Some blamed Claire. Others blamed me. Patrick was suspended from trust authority. The convent and Western estate entered court protection. Claire lost Sunday's vote, the reason she had created the fake engagement. She also refused to let her board describe the deception as harmless. I made the choice, she said during an emergency meeting. Pressure explains it. Pressure does not erase responsibility. She temporarily stepped down as executive director while the board reviewed her conduct. You do not have to resign, I told her outside Donovan Hall. Neither did you have to stay. I stayed for reasons outside the agreement. That is the problem. She held the sapphire inside its box. I do not know whether I protected you because I care because I brought you into the estate, or because your claim could save my project. And I do not know whether I want you beside me because you were the first person who asked which name I chose. Then we cannot trust what happened yet. Her boundary hurt because it protected both of us. What do we do? You learn who Thomas and David were without anyone claiming you. I rebuild my work without your property. Megan chooses her marriage without the estate gift. If something remains after the investigation, the wedding, and the land disappear from between us, we face it then. No assumptions. No contract. No fake ring. Tears brightened her eyes, but she nodded. No more pretending. She placed the box in my hand and walked toward the house before either of us could use crisis as a reason to stop her. DNA and adoption records confirmed 2 weeks later that David Walker had been born David Thomas Donovan. Samuel and Ruth Walker adopted him after Anna's death. My father had kept Walker because it belonged to the people who raised him. The discovery gave me facts, not instant belonging. Rebecca asked whether she could embrace me. I allowed it. Megan offered photographs and letters without insisting I accept her as family. Patrick attempted one private conversation. I agreed only with attorneys present. Your father concealed his identity from you, he said. So did you. He denied you property. He gave me a life. Both can be true, Claire said from the doorway. Patrick looked toward her. You continue defending him. I am defending his right to decide what each truth means. My father's final journal explained his silence. James, Thomas, and Anna gave me a beginning. Samuel and Ruth Walker gave me a life. I returned to Don Hall, believing blood would force honesty. Patrick threatened the man who had become my father, and I chose silence. The first silence protected Samuel. The later years protected me from the fear that you would look at our house and see only a hiding place. Keep Walker if it honors the life we built. Take Donovan if it helps repair what was stolen. Carry both if choosing one feels like another lie. I chose James David Walker. Donovan became part of my legal history and the property documents, but Walker remained on my company sign. Discovering Thomas did not demote David, Samuel, or Ruth. It widened the story without allowing blood to erase the people who stayed. The investigation lasted 11 months. Financial records proved Edward Donovan diverted charitable money, exploited convent residents as unpaid labor, falsified maintenance reports, and concealed the circumstances of Thomas's crash. Investigators could not prove Edward intended to kill him, but they established that family security struck his vehicle while trying to recover evidence and delayed medical help. A rural clinic ledger revealed Thomas survived for almost 2 years with severe injuries and memory loss. He repeatedly asked whether Anna and David were safe. He died before learning Samuel had successfully raised his son. Patrick admitted helping conceal the old records, intercepting David's later letters, and attempting to transfer the Western estate before the reversion clause became public. He denied knowing the full extent of Edward's crimes when he was young. He entered a restitution agreement and resigned from every company and trust role. Donovan Construction did not collapse. Luxury properties were sold. Executives lost positions. Employees continued working under independent oversight. Former convent residents received compensation for unpaid labor. The people who warned that truth would destroy everything discovered that truth mostly destroyed their control. The convent and Western estate transferred to me under Thomas's reversion clause. I immediately placed them into a public benefit trust controlled by former foster youth, housing experts, preservation professionals, local residents, and one temporary family representative. I cast the activating vote and declined a permanent seat. Thomas created the clause to stop one family from controlling the property, I told Rebecca. Replacing the Donovans with me would repeat the mistake. Claire submitted second door's proposal through the open process. She refused private preference. Her plan competed against a community college, a residential treatment organization, and a public arts program. She lost the first vote. The college offered stronger transportation funding and a larger operating reserve. When I called, expecting devastation, she said, "I spent 3 years defending a building when the mission was the people. Losing the convent may force me to build something better." She found an abandoned nursing campus closer to Richmond, beside a bus route connecting 2 colleges, a hospital, and several employers willing to provide apprenticeships. The building lacked the convent's beauty but served residents better. She named the program Open Return and rebuilt the entire plan. The Donovan Trust later converted the convent into a smaller residential and agricultural program operated by former foster youth. Thomas's charitable purpose survived without becoming the only possible address for Claire's work. Megan and Eric rescheduled their wedding 6 months after the canceled ceremony. They married in a public botanical garden with no property gift, no trust announcement, and no attempt to turn the event into family restoration. Megan asked me to attend. "You do not owe us that," she said. "I know. Then come only if you want to." I went because she had learned the difference between invitation and claim. Patrick attended quietly in the back row. He gave no speech and offered no land. Megan walked toward Eric with Rebecca beside her for part of the aisle, then completed the final steps alone. "I am not being transferred," she said during the rehearsal. "I am arriving." Claire served as maid of honor. We saw each other across the garden for the first time in 3 months. She wore a dark blue dress and no ring. We spoke only briefly. "You look well, she said. "You look tired." "Direct as always." "You hired me for accuracy." Her smile faded. "I miss you." The words were too important to answer casually. "I miss you too." That does not solve anything. No. But it is true. Yes, we did not begin again that day. The wedding belonged to Megan and Eric. Distance remained necessary until neither investigation nor property could explain our attraction. For the next 6 months, Claire and I saw each other only during public trust meetings and preservation reviews. Every conversation remained polite, careful, and far too short. Distance proved we were not mistaking danger for intimacy. It also showed me how much space she had already occupied in my ordinary life. I missed the way she aligned folders before difficult discussions, the dry humor she revealed when no relative watched, and the fierce clarity with which she surrendered the exact property she had spent years pursuing rather than accept it through my silence. I began admitting something I had resisted since the chapel. I did not miss the fictional fiancé, I missed Claire. My company recovered slowly. I refused Patrick's offer and accepted restoration work from the public trust only through open bidding. We won one convent cottage contract and lost the chapel stabilization to a firm with a stronger accessibility plan. My business partner treated the loss as proof that ethical procurement was financially hostile. Ethics are inconvenient, I told him. That is how Claire says we know they are real. He looked at me. You still talk to her? Only at meetings. You say her name more often than the meetings occur. The real choice came on a cold February morning when Claire entered my workshop carrying 2 coffees, rolled plans, and a small wooden box. Open Return received the nursing campus lease. She said. Congratulations. Construction begins in April. You earned it. We need a preservation consultant. Open bidding? The main contract is open bidding. The historical assessment falls below the procurement threshold. Convenient. I checked with 3 attorneys, 2 auditors, and Megan, who believes every emotional decision now requires a written conflict policy. She placed my coffee beside the sanding block. 1 sugar, no cream. Then why are you here instead of sending a formal request? She set the wooden box on my workbench. Inside was the sapphire ring from our false engagement. Because every important thing has happened for 11 months and you remain the first person I want to tell. My chest tightened. That could be gratitude. I am grateful to the state investigator. I do not rehearse conversations with him while driving. Perhaps he has less interesting opinions about stone foundations. He has very detailed opinions about evidence storage. Neither fact answers the question. Claire smiled, then became serious. I missed you. I set down the brass hinge in my hand. I missed you too. Her shoulders lowered. Then asked me to dinner. You came here to instruct me to invite you? I am practicing direct communication. 7 tonight? You remembered my schedule? I was hired to remember details. Our first real date took place at a small restaurant beside the James River where no relatives, trustees, or wedding guests could observe us. Claire wore a red sweater instead of the formal clothes she chose at Donovan Hall. She left her phone inside her bag. We spoke about our adult lives rather than the archive. She told me Open Return began after a girl from her group home aged out at 18, lost access to her college dorm during winter break, and spent 9 nights sleeping inside a hospital waiting room because it was the only heated place that did not require a permanent address. Everyone praised her independence, Claire said. No one asked whether independence was simply abandonment made respectable. I told her I became a restorer because my father once brought home a broken clock and made me study every gear before touching it. He said understanding why something stopped mattered more than hiding the damage. Was the proposal speech real? Claire asked after dessert. Which part? Wanting the ordinary evenings. I had known you one day. That is not an answer. It was real enough that I almost refused the engagement. Why? Because I could imagine them. She looked down at her hands. So could I. We walked beside the river afterward. Winter lights reflected across the water. Claire stopped beneath an iron footbridge. Our contract allowed 1 kiss if refusing would expose the arrangement. We never used it. There was no credible need. Very efficient. The engagement ended 11 months ago. I know. Then no kiss is necessary. Is that a refusal? I touched her cheek. It is why it would matter. I waited until she nodded. The kiss began carefully, without an audience, property transfer, trust vote, or wedding crisis requiring it. Then her hands closed around my coat, and every stage touch at Donovan Hall became obviously empty beside the real one. When we separated, she rested her forehead against mine. That felt new, she whispered. Good. We dated for 18 months before discussing marriage. Claire opened the first residential wing at Open Return. My company won part of the restoration through competitive bidding and lost another section to a firm with a stronger energy efficiency plan. Claire refused to influence the board. Ethics are inconvenient, she reminded me when I complained. We learned that love did not erase habits created by abandonment and secrecy. I hid financial trouble when a supplier sued my company, telling myself I was protecting her from stress. She found the legal papers and said, "You cannot promise honesty and carry danger alone because silence feels noble." She was right. Months later, when a grant was delayed and Claire began sleeping in her office, I told her independence had become isolation. She went home, rested, and delegated the emergency budget. Love did not remove our defense. It gave them nowhere safe to hide. Megan and Eric became regular volunteers at Open Return. Rebecca joined the advisory board only after signing strict conflict of interest rules. Patrick wrote letters without requesting forgiveness. Claire read the one addressed to her when she was ready. I met him once in the smaller house where he lived after losing Donovan Hall. I told myself David wanted to destroy the family, he said. My father stayed away because the Walkers loved him, not because you silenced him. Yes. Do you regret what happened or only what it cost? He took a long time to answer. Both. I wish the better answer were complete. Honesty did not create reconciliation, but it ended another performance. Some relationships continued through boundaries. Others remained distant. Healing did not require placing everyone back inside the same ceremony. 2 years after Patrick canceled Megan's wedding, Open Return and the restored convent held a joint anniversary celebration. Residents from both programs gathered beneath the old chapel bell. Thomas's letters, David's journal, the joined cufflinks, the canceled wedding program, and the sapphire ring were displayed inside a small archive documenting how the truth surfaced. Beside them lay our original engagement agreement. Claire had crossed out the clause denying emotional assumptions and written beneath it, any relationship created to satisfy family expectations must be reconsidered after no ceremony, property, or reputation can benefit from the answer. Megan stood beneath the chapel arch and addressed the residents, donors, craftspeople, and trust members. The first time James entered Donovan Hall, my father saw a threat before he saw a person. I saw the man whose existence canceled my wedding. Claire saw someone who deserved to decide what happened to his own history. She looked toward Eric. A ceremony can be postponed. Consent cannot be replaced. Property can change hands. A marriage should not begin as a transaction between families. Patrick attended from the back without speaking. Rebecca returned the cufflinks to me after their temporary display. Thomas used them to hide a key, she said. David carried one as proof he was afraid to use. You decide what they mean now. Claire touched my arm. Walk with me. She led me through the courtyard to the restored convent library. Lanterns glowed between shelves filled with books, job resources, and framed photographs of residents receiving their first keys. On the reading table sat a wooden box made from oak recovered from the chapel bell frame that had nearly fallen on us. You planned something, I said. Possibly. Without board approval? Personal gifts are exempt. She opened the box. Inside was the sapphire from our false engagement reset into a simple gold band. Engraved inside were the words chosen after the ceremony stopped. My heartbeat changed. Claire, the first time I wore this stone, I wanted my family to believe someone had chosen me. The truth was that I had hired your presence because I believed my work needed a man's commitment before powerful people would call me permanent. She took my hand. For a long time, I worried loving you would always contain that transaction and the property your identity could give my project. So, we ended it. We stepped away. Open Return opened without the convent. Your company survived without Patrick's money. Megan married without the estate gift. After every practical reason to remain connected disappeared, you were still the person I wanted beside me. Are you proposing? I am considering it. Then I object. Her expression fell until I removed another wooden box from my jacket. Mine was made from walnut salvaged from my father's workshop. Megan told you, she said. Megan believes family secrecy should be treated with excessive disclosure. I opened the box. Inside was a ring set with a small green stone that had belonged to Ruth Walker. The first time I met you, you asked me to pretend that loving you made you more qualified to create homes for people who needed them. Not my strongest strategic decision. Then you stood inside a collapsing chapel and offered to lose the convent rather than let Patrick purchase my silence. That was the first time I understood the engagement had become emotionally dangerous. I lowered myself onto one knee. Thomas and Anna gave my father a beginning. Samuel and Ruth Walker gave him a life. David and my mother gave me mine. You love me without asking any of those histories to disappear. I love the woman who would rather rebuild an entire dream than receive a property through someone else's erasure. I love the way you challenge bad budgets, straighten sugar packets when anxious, and create homes where one mistake does not become exile. Claire Donovan, will you marry me without performance, leverage, family approval, inherited property, or any ceremony depending on the answer? Tears moved down her cheeks. She knelt in front of me. Stand up. This position is traditional. Our first engagement disrupted enough questionable traditions. I stood. She held my face between her hands. Before I answer, promise me something. Anything honest. When fear makes you want to protect me by hiding the truth, speak. I promise. When I turn independence into distance, tell me. I promise. And if my father cancels another wedding, we keep the officiant's number and a backup venue. Claire laughed through tears. Then, yes. I placed Ruth's ring on her finger. She slipped the sapphire onto mine. Why do I wear this one? I asked. Because the first time I wore proof that I hired your commitment. This time you wear proof that you freely returned. Applause erupted from behind the library shelves. Megan, Eric, Rebecca, open return residents, convent apprentices, my employees, and Claire's attorney stepped into view. Claire closed her eyes. You promised privacy. Megan lifted the old ceremony folder. I promised not to let Dad cancel anything before the answer. We married the following spring in the courtyard at open return. Young adults who had lived there during its first year attended alongside my craftsmen, counselors, teachers, and former Donovan employees who had chosen accountability over reputation. Photographs of Thomas, Anna, David, Samuel, Ruth, and my mother stood together near the ceremony. Rebecca carried the joined cufflinks. Megan carried the 2-ring boxes and complained that a bride whose first wedding had been canceled should not become responsible for anyone else's ceremony logistics. Patrick attended quietly at the back after Claire agreed to his presence. He made no speech and claimed no role. Claire walked toward me alone because, as she explained, she was not being transferred from one authority to another. She was making a choice. During our vows, I promised never to confuse silence with protection. Claire promised never to confuse independence with isolation. We both promised that any children we raised would know the whole family story at an age they could understand, without growing up sensing that names, property, or relationships had been hidden around them. Years later, the original wedding program rests inside the convent archive stamped, "Ceremony Cancelled." Beside it hangs a photograph from Megan's rescheduled wedding and another from ours. Our daughter once asked why her grandfather canceled Aunt Megan's first ceremony after seeing her father. Because he recognized my face in the cufflink, I said. Was Daddy dangerous? She asked Claire. Only to old lies. Did Aunt Megan stop loving Uncle Eric? No. Then why did they wait? Megan answered from across the room. Because love was not the only truth we needed to respect that day. Our daughter considered the sapphire on my hand. Did Mommy have to marry you because you were her fake fiancé? No, Claire said. That was the important part. Then why did she? Much later, I answered. After every ceremony, contract, and property condition was gone, we asked each other. The sapphire still bears a tiny scratch from the night Claire placed it on Thomas's archive. She refused to polish it away when the stone was reset. She says marks are useful when they remind us that something can survive, being used for the wrong purpose without pretending the damage never happened. Everyone thought Claire had chosen a stranger to play her fiancé for one wedding weekend. Patrick canceled the ceremony because he recognized the son of the man his family had erased and feared the wedding gift would expose the stolen estate. Yet the canceled ceremony did not create my future with Claire. Blood returned Thomas and Anna to my family story. David's journal explained the silence that protected and wounded us. The reversion deed preserved the convent for the people it had always been meant to serve. None of those things made Claire and me belong together. That choice came later, after the wedding was rescheduled, after the fake ring was returned, after we stepped apart, and after she entered my workshop with coffee and no reason to stay, except that she wanted me. Being invited to a wedding is not the same as being welcomed into a family. Wearing a ring is not the same as choosing a life. A father can cancel a ceremony, but he cannot cancel the truth that brought two people together or force them to remain once the performance ends. Every ordinary evening, when Claire leaves her shoes beside the door and spreads open return reports across our kitchen table, the joined cufflinks rest nearby. They no longer open a hidden archive. That is why we keep them. They remind us that family objects can unlock the past, but they should never lock anyone inside it. Real commitment begins only when every audience has gone home, every property has changed hands, and two people still choose the ordinary life waiting after the ceremony. If this story reminded you that love must remain free even when family history, property, and public expectations collide, subscribe and share it with someone who believes the most important promise is the one made after every false reason to stay has disappeared. And tell me in the comments, if a wedding were canceled because a stranger's identity exposed an old family lie, would you reschedule immediately or wait until every person involved could choose without pressure?